In a proud nation like the USA, the veterans that fought for our freedom are often well respected, but sadly not always well taken care of. Many veterans have found life after service very difficult, and for John, this is no exception. After 25 years of service, he found that his real battle had only just begun. But after everything was set and done, he felt like he was ready for one final adventure. But when John goes to buy a car to take him on this adventure, he could have never guessed that this simple purchase would result in something so incredible and unexpected, it would change his final days completely. A man approaches John. A young man comes out of the small building and approaches John. "I see you have made your choice, sir. Excellent." John puts his hand on the car he wants to buy and smiles. It's perfect for the drive, his final adventure. He could not be more ready. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Meet John. This story is about John, an old U.S. veteran with the exceptional age of 104 years. He lived with his dog Bobby in a small but cozy house on the outskirts of town and was living a happy life. But John's life hasn't always been as good and easy as now. Good and bad memories. Like many other veterans, John often thinks back to his service and past life with mixed feelings. Both good and bad memories shoot through his mind when he thinks of his past. But there was one particular thing he had very bad memories of, and it just couldn't let him go. Kicked out back in the days, John joined the Army when he was about 22 years old. In his youth, he never had the ambition or dream to join the military when he was older. But when he was kicked out of college for the umpteenth time, he decided to change his life drastically. Misbehavior. Since John often got himself into trouble and was known as a disobedient student who had trouble with authority. Therefore, his father decided that it would be good if he could get more discipline, and the Army was the perfect place for this, although it was not what John had expected. On the verge of giving up from day one, John was struggling, both physically and mentally, due to the strict rules and heavy training camps in which he was drilled. It was no fun at all, and he had often been on the verge of giving up and going back to his old life. But then, suddenly, something changed. An unexpected change. After a pretty long time of struggling and being unhappy, John got used to his new life and actually started to like this way of living. He noticed in himself that he was becoming more and more disciplined, and the brotherhood was also very important to him. But this was not all. Against all odds, one day, John and his comrades had one of the toughest workouts on the schedule. Against all odds, John finished as one of the best, and finally felt that he was gaining some respect from the rest. His self-confidence was sky high at the time, but unfortunately, his didn't last long. Missions abroad. His supervisor also saw that John was doing a good job and was developing himself at a rapid pace. Despite the fact that John was still a young man, he was increasingly sent on difficult missions overseas. But here his self-confidence slowly broke down, and he had good reasons for that. Burned inside his brain. Although he considered himself a tough guy, John saw horrible things during these missions that were burned inside his brain and that he would never be able to forget. John was finding it increasingly difficult to deal with these memories and images in his head. But fortunately, he found support. Like brothers, the only thing that helped him through these tough times were the other guys in his unit. Since they all experienced the same struggles and saw the same things, they had a very strong connection and became like brothers for each other, until John decided to change his life once again. 25 years of service. After 25 years of service, John got honorably discharged after a psychologist concluded that he was mentally incapable of going on another mission. It left John with mixed feelings since, on the one hand, he was glad he didn't have to do this anymore. But on the other hand, there was something that made him sad. Diluted contact. The one thing that caused him the most grief was the fact that the other guys in his unit did stay for a couple more years, and this resulted in the contact between John and the others being diluted. And there was another reason why the contact became less and less. A woman in his life. What also didn't help is that John was starting to put all his effort into something else. Namely, his new girlfriend named Marilyn. This was completely new to him, as he had never really known such love since he had focused only on his work for the biggest part of his life. Only 2 weeks after John had left the military, he had met Marilyn on a regular Friday night at his local bar. It was love at first sight in John's eyes, but at first he doubted if this was mutual. Luckily, he soon noticed that Marilyn was also interested in him, a regular Friday night distraction. At the time, John went to this local bar at least twice a week to suppress his bad memories. And since he was desperately looking for something or someone to take his mind off his time in the military, Marilyn came into his life at exactly the right moment. And this was only the beginning. Getting married in the 2 years that followed, the pair found out that they had found true love in each other, and it felt like it was predestined. They even decided to get married. Only John had no idea that his wedding party would turn out differently than he had in mind beforehand. A painful way John was head over heels in love with Marilyn, and he had given her all his time and attention. But this had meant John kept in touch even less with his former military friends. By the time he got married, there was no contact left whatsoever, and he found this out in a painful way. I don't believe him. John had sent them all an invite to his wedding, but he heard nothing from his old friends. After a couple of weeks, only one of them replied that he would not be able to attend the wedding because of other commitments. But John's gut feeling told him this was just a lame excuse. Too proud, this was the first time in a while John realized he missed his friend and that perhaps he had not spent enough time with them. But with Marilyn in his life, he could easily manage this. He paid no further attention to it either because he was too proud to admit his mistakes. Unhappy years in the next couple of years. His relationship with Marilyn is flourishing, but it does seem like it's the only thing that is going right in John's life. There were other things that gnawed at him that he kept suppressed for a long time and didn't talk to anyone about. Things got even worse. The biggest problem by far for John was that, after the years went by, he increasingly started to feel the negative effects of being in the military for such a long time. Old physical injuries keep reoccurring, and also mentally he was struggling. And unfortunately for John, things got even worse. Horrible flashbacks. After a while of suppressing his negative thoughts and memories, John started to have horrible flashbacks to his time in the military. The flashbacks could come up at any time of the day, and he also suffered from nightmares that kept him up during the night. But also his wife was struggling. Not the only struggle John's. Mental and physical problems also had a negative impact on the family mood. In addition, John and his wife had financial problems as well. By this point, they had 2 kids together, but could barely afford to take care of them. The future wasn't looking bright either for them. It depended on her because of John's problems. He had become disabled and was unable to do any normal work for the rest of his life. It also didn't help that he had actually accrued almost no pension during his time in the military. Therefore, everything depended on Marilyn, but her work situation was unfortunately not ideal either. You have to sell everything. Unlike John, his wife Marilyn did have a job. However, because she had not finished school in the past, she did not earn well and she could hardly pay the bills with this money. Therefore, the family was forced to sell almost all possessions they could miss, including their car. It struck like a bomb. This hit John particularly hard as he loved to drive and had a passion for cars. With the car sold, he had to find other solutions to get somewhere. Because public transportation stressed him out, he hardly ever left the house anymore, which put him in a negative spiral once again. Light at the end of the tunnel. Despite all the problems and setbacks, the family did stay together and held on to the love and bond they all had together. They managed to keep their heads above water, and it looked like better times were coming soon. Finally, there was light at the end of the tunnel. Just the 2 of us. The 2 children grew older and older, and at some point they both decided to leave the family home for good. This left John and Marilyn with just the 2 of them, but luckily it also left them with a bit more money that they could spend on their old day. Faith had something else in store. Because they had some extra money, the stress and problems reduced for both of them, and they had energy and money once again to do fun things. They made all kinds of plans about what they wanted to do in the future, but Faith had something else in store for them. Terrible news just when everything was looking brighter for them. His wife received the terrible news that she was incurably ill. Her health was deteriorating rapidly, and after a short sickbed, she sadly passed away. At first, John was devastated, but after a short period of time, he realized that life went on. Search for contact. But after the loss of his wife, John felt like he had nobody left and desperately tried to search for contact with his old military colleagues in order to restore the bond they had and to seek distraction. However, the hard reality was that most of them had passed away already or lived somewhere else. He came up with an idea. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact his old mates, he lost his nerve, and eventually, he gave up. The period that followed was a dark one for John because he was alone most of the time with no one around him. But one day he came up with an idea that would change all this. One last adventure on that specific day, John was sitting at home watching TV and suddenly realized that he may not have much time left either. Therefore, he simply decided that he wanted to experience one last exciting adventure in his life and feel young once again, just like the good old days. Road trip. Since John has always had a passion for cars, he thinks it would be great to take one last road trip through the country. Luckily for him, he has kept his driver's license up to date all those years, despite the fact that he didn't have a car. So he decided to go to the dealer. "I know this one." A salesman came to help him and recognized the badge John was wearing right away. The badge was representing his former unit in the military, and the salesman told John that his father had the same badge. It could not be otherwise than that John and his father knew each other. Off the grid, how could he not have found him if he lived so close? The salesman told him that his father went completely off the grid after retiring because he could not adapt to his normal life. So he would definitely love a visit from John and a buddy where he could share old stories with.